Hello and welcome to Reset Diaries. Today on the show, we are joined by a seasoned global marketer with over 2 decades of experience in building brands across categories, companies, and continents. From leading KitKat's global innovation at Nestle to pivoting from B2C to B2B, from confectionery to animal nutrition, his career is a masterclass in adaptability and strategic thinking. Currently, he's based in Switzerland and he brings rich insights on multicultural leadership, the evolving marketing landscape, and what it takes to connect with next generation of customers with technology and much more. Hello, Kunal. Welcome to Reset Diaries. As I just mentioned in your introduction that you've had quite a few transitions in your career, in your life. So we will unpack those transitions. But just as a start, I want to begin about your transition from the world of B2C to B2B. Was that a conscious decision or it is something that just organically evolved over a period of time?
Hey, first of all, thank you once again, Asta, for having me on your podcast. And I think it's a good place to start this conversation. It's not an easy answer. It's not this or that. It was a combination of me being in Switzerland and also me trying to reflect on what do I want to do next. So I must say that I had spent about 13 years in the B2C FMCG world, and I was thinking about what should be my next move. And I wanted to find something which would, one, get me out of my comfort zone, but yet help me leverage my experience. I didn't want to go completely out of it. And that's when, the seed of this B2B marketing started germinating in my mind. And a few years back, when I was still looking and thinking about this, I was seeing two kinds of, let's say, B2B companies out there. There were companies that were still stuck in the old traditional styles of B2B marketing. And to me, it was clear that they will struggle, especially as AI evolves, as technological evolution happens. And then there were companies that were realizing that they need to bring marketing in front and center. And they were looking to the B2C space for best practices, for ideas, and even for talent. So I would say I was at the right place at the right time because my expat stint with Nestle in Switzerland was coming to an end. And I was thinking about what next? Do I go back to India or do I find something here in Switzerland? And that's when this role with DSM Firmenich, which was back then DSM, came about. And I made the shift. And since then, I've been in the B2B world. It's been a great learning curve.
So they say never, but any hopes or any plans of switching back to B2C, or you will constantly experiment, or you think B2B is the space to be in right now when it comes to marketing?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, never say never, but I'm happy where I am at the moment. I think we're at the cusp of B2B marketing where it's moving at a really fast pace. In fact, if you speak about an event like the Cannes Lions, they have now started introducing dedicated B2B awards, B2B marketing juries. So I think they also realize that with the way the marketing is shifting in the B2B world, they want to kind of recognize the talent, the work that's coming out from there. So I think I'm at the right place. I'm enjoying this. And so far, no plans to change.
This is very interesting. I didn't know. I mean, for me, I always used to think cans is only for like those ads that we see on television. Or
Yes.
So it's interesting to know that they have started doing it like a specific target for B2B as well. That's nice to know.
Yes, because they've seen the shift, that the way the marketing in the B2B is evolving, whether it's in terms of purpose, in terms of emotion, in terms of storytelling, and I'm happy to delve a bit more into that as we go into the conversation. But I think the folks there, the organizing committee, saw that there was a big shift happening, and it was not about just awarding the creativity of the B2C world, but also bringing the B2B in the center. And I think that's worth celebrating, and I'm actually keen to see how that evolves.
So Kunal, you are a seasoned marketer having dabbled in B2C and now in B2B. I believe this is my understanding that shifting from B2C to B2B requires a significant mindset reset on its own. So what was some of the biggest shifts you had to make, if at all you had to make any, while you were transitioning?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I must say that it's never easy to make this kind of a shift. And for sure, I also had to make some shifts in terms of my thinking, my mindset. Probably there are three different shifts that come to my mind. Let me see if I can recount those. One of the first one was, as you know, that in the B2C world, there is only one end consumer. Whereas in the B2B world, it's a long purchase cycle with many decision makers. So I had to reorient my approach in terms of the marketing and communication. It's not directly to that end consumer. So that was one mindset shift that I had to make. The second thing is that linked to this comment that I made, the relationship in the B2C world is directly between the consumer and the brand. It's so much stronger between the consumer and the brand. In the B2B world, it's actually the relationship is first with the customer and the sales team. The
Mm,
brand plays a secondary role. It's playing the supporting role. Of course, the brand matters, but it's not the first transaction interaction point for the customer. How do you switch that with that mindset? How do you start doing your marketing? That was the other thing. And I think the third thing was that in the B2C world, you can see impact of your marketing work much earlier. You run a consumer promotion, you run a campaign, you can prove it, you can see it in terms of sales numbers, in terms of spikes. In the B2B world, the waiting period is so long that it's so difficult to always do a direct attribution. You might run a campaign today, you might launch something today, but it takes time to see the results. So patience in terms of seeing results was the other mindset shift that I had to do.
right,
These
right.
are the three that really come to my mind.
Because I think in B2C, it's like very instant gratification. You run a
Yes.
campaign, you do something, and you
Yes.
just immediately see the results. However, I
Yeah.
mean, technology is assisting in B2B as well. But it's interesting you said that in B2B world, it's the salespeople who are also doing the work of marketeers in the sense in front of the customer. So talking more about B2B, I want to ask you, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about B2B marketing that you have encountered, or and also have you tried in to bring in your own B2C experience to counter some of those
Mhm.
preconceived notions or some of those misconceptions?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the biggest misconception that I noticed was that people in the B2B world tend to think that the audience, the customers in the B2B world, is only interested in functional information and technical information.
Mm,
Emotions are not so important. And I think this is the biggest myth that exists or misconception that exists in the B2B world. I mean, I just said that the relationship in the B2B marketing is between the customer and the frontline salespeople. And
mm,
how do you build that relationship? Emotion is the foundation of that. And therefore, I believe that the communication and the marketing we do in B2B world, emotion and emotional storytelling becomes even more important than B2C. And I think that's what's not understood in the B2B
mm.
world. And another interesting thing, Asta, is that when people think about emotion, of course, they'll talk about things that touch the heart and all of that, which is
Empathy.
great.
Yeah, yeah.
Empathy, emotions, all of that, happiness.
Mm,
But sometimes they forget that humor is such a powerful and strong emotion, which can really do wonders in the B2B marketing. I mean, sometimes I kind of have conversations with people and I say, look, the audience in the B2B world is watching the same kind of content that the B2C audience is
mm,
on the same platforms. They are laughing on the same Instagram reels, TikTok videos. They're on the same platforms. If your brand's tone of voice allows you to use humor, leverage it, use it. So I think this was this big misconception and myth that was there, that we need to not stay away from emotions. I mean, I
yeah.
always say this, and I've said this
Upside.
in a few, exactly, and I've said this in a few other podcasts as well. Who gave the memo that B2B has to be boring to boring? I mean,
Yeah,
B2B has to be informational,
yeah.
educational, entertaining, all of that. So
Right.
there was this was sort of my first myth that I saw and encountered, and I used my CPG experience to kind of break that, because storytelling and emotions is such an important part of what you do in marketing in B2C. So that's one thing that comes to mind. I think the other thing that I saw in B2B, and it's not a myth, but it's just there was not a good recognition of the power of consistency. And I can talk about my own experience. Before DSM Finish, I was with Nestle for many years, and KitKat as a brand, the tagline "Have a break, have a KitKat." That tagline hasn't been touched for almost 70 years across markets. Now, this is a global brand. Marketers can come and go, but this tagline, you're not allowed to touch or mess with it. And that's the reason today, if you mention to anyone just the first part of this tagline, "Have a break," consumers themselves will be able to relay back the second line,
Mm,
"Have a KitKat." Now that's the power of consistency.
mm.
So that's the other thing that I kind of brought in, that how do we make things consistent? Because that's how you start building brand equity. And the third thing is tone of voice. Again, B2B marketers don't really spend that much time and energy in crafting their tone of voice. And as a result, what happens is that sometimes the communication comes across a bit confused, not clear. But if you take a little time in sharpening and defining your tone of voice, then
Mm.
every piece of communication across every touch point becomes very coherent, very consistent. So this was the other thing I brought from my CPG experience in terms of what we do in B2B marketing.
Very interesting. You're right. I mean, usually B2B companies in the similar segment, if you cluster them and you close your eyes, and you can literally hear the same words.
Yeah.
and we won't be able to make out who is who. So, whether it's tech or whether it's manufacturing services, pharma, everybody talks about pretty much same adjectives. And I love the humor bit that you said. And while you were saying it, there was only one ad that was running in my mind, which B2B ad, which of late I've seen is the Salesforce campaign that they did with Matthew
Always.
McNoy. Oh my God, that was hilarious. And it was so informative and educational at the
Yes.
same time when about the data theft and AI agents,
Yes.
they use all of that on their platform. But I want to ask you any example from your side. You think any B2B organization have nailed it very well in terms of humor and consistency?
Yeah, I mean, Salesforce is always a one example that does come up across geographies. I would say Gong is another brand that does some really good work. Gong
Oh,
is another B2B company,
mm,
and it does really good communication. Hootsuite also is another one, which is a
mm,
digital platform, and they do a good job and they make things really really fun. And SAP as well. Sometimes SAP, not always. Sometimes they use nice emotions and humor. I remember recently they were showing their office where they showed the office in winter and the office in summer, two different visuals. It's emotional, but it's also funny. So I think SAP is the other one that kind of comes to my mind.
okay, interesting. I'll
Yeah.
check out some other names that you mentioned just now.
Yeah.
But Kunal, moving back to what you said earlier, that in B2C, the focus is on individual customer. Now, how do you reframe this understanding of the customer in your world? And what strategies do you employ to ensure that brand remains relevant and it resonates with C-suite, as well as your procurement, as well as the actual users? I know I asked too many things, so we can break it down,
Yeah.
but let's start with how do you reframe the understanding of customer?
Yeah. So, like I was mentioning in the previous question as well, it's not one single consumer. Or when we say customer, we are talking of multiple customers within that one definition of a customer. Procurement, sustainability, C-suite, all of them are decision makers. In fact, we say that sometimes it can take 15 to 20 interactions with different profiles
Yeah.
before a purchase decision is made. And then there's an interesting concept called collective confidence. You need
Mm,
to build collective confidence amongst this entire set of decision makers before a purchase decision happens. But I must also say that, even though B2B marketers don't really interact directly with consumers, at least I can speak for on my behalf in my company, that we still have to listen to what the final consumer is asking, what the final consumer is demanding, because it has implications for all the players in the value chain. And that becomes important. And along with that, there are other important influences in the ecosystem who are not customers, but you have to listen to them. This
mm,
could be regulatory bodies, this could be investor community, academia. What is it that they are saying, and how do you listen to them to then craft your communication, but also your product launch strategy? And when you combine what the consumer is saying, what the ecosystem is telling you, along with the macro trends,
mm.
then you can design your marketing strategy according to all of this, combining all of this together. So that's a way to kind of look at it. And this is where audience mapping as an exercise becomes extremely important. And what I mean by that, and this is something we do very regularly at DSM, but I always say this is something that whether you're in B2C or B2B, as a marketer, it's something you should spend time and energy on. What we do is we look at our focus geographies,
Mm,
our focus customers, job profiles, personas, and
mm,
then we come up with our clear target audience. And what that does is that even though we have multiple customers who are making the decision, we can still craft our communication very personalized, very sharp.
mm.
We can do account based marketing. So, in a way, the communication is still happening one to one, although
Right.
the decision is taking place with multiple decision makers. So that's one way in which we try and kind of bring those multiple customers under a single framework. Yeah.
Interesting. And also, I was listening on one podcast. So it's good you spoke about the audience mapping and all of that.
Mhm.
But in a podcast, there's this, especially in B2B sector, there's a new trend towards employee generated content. So I want
Yes.
to ask you, how have you seen or how do you see this landscape evolving, wherein employees themselves become like that change maker or that influencer?
Yes.
What's your observation in general around that trend?
So this is extremely extremely important in the B2B world because, like I said,
Mm,
transactions take place built on relationship, and the
yeah.
foundation of any relationship is trust.
Mm,
And trust happens when customers, when our audiences listen to what we have to say, not from a company's handle, of course that will happen, not
mm,
from a company's page, but from what employees are saying. And these
mm,
employees can be different kinds. You can have thought leaders, which are the leaders of the company, the CEO, the founder, what they have to say, their point of view, which could be a bit more future looking, forward looking. And then just general employees, what do they have to say about their product? How proudly do they share about what the company is doing? So we spend a lot of time and energy in ensuring that what we do, of course, we do external communication, but we also make it available to our employees so that if they want to talk about it, they want to bring their own perspective to it, point of view to it, it helps because we've seen this. The trust levels go up significantly when customers get information from employees rather than just the company's official pages. So, employee advocacy, as we call it, is an extremely important piece. And most B2B companies, we spoke about Salesforce, we spoke about SAP, they also spend a lot of time, money, effort in doing the employee advocacy. So that's an important piece. And it also is about making it comfortable for the employees. So how can you, let's say, give them a predetermined post which allows them to go out there and speak about it, and then of course give their own personality and voice and touch to it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, especially I've seen this a lot in tech, but I've
Yes.
still not seen it much in other industries as much. But I was reading that this is a growing trend. This is what
For
it's
sure.
leading towards. Wonderful. So we'll move a little bit towards the advisory section now, Kunal, because I want
Okay.
my audiences who's listening to this, and you shared some brilliant nuggets already about
Thank you.
B2B marketing in general. But let's talk about your own international career that you have built over the years. So, what if somebody today listening to Kunal thinks, I want to be in that position, where I can craft an international career for myself? So, what are some of the key things that they should look for within them? Like some green lights or red lights? Like, what are the key things that they should look in?
Right. I think, first of all, it's extremely important for anyone who's looking for an international career to be very clear why they want an international career. Because that itself, the single important question, will help them to then decide how do they want to approach it. Are they looking for a short term exposure? Is that what is in their mind? Are they looking for a career pivot where they want to shift gears, change trajectory, move like I did from B2C to B2B or whatever? Or is it that they just want to get out of the country that they are in for personal reasons? Each of this dimension will then allow them to think about how do they want to play out their international career trajectory. So that's an important piece that I always advise people if they are looking for international careers. The second thing is that it's always easier if you can start an international career by moving from the company that you're in into another country. And the reason I say that is that you have a bit of a protection net while you're still building your learning curve in terms of exposure, culture, all of that. And also you have a bit of job security because if things don't work out in a new country, you can always your company can move you back to your own country. So that's another advice I would say, that try and do that with your own company rather than going completely out on your own.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the matter is that it may look very exciting when you read about it, when you see it, but any international career in any part of the world, and you live it yourself, Asta. So it does come with its share of challenges. It will get you out of your comfort zone. I always say this as well, that it's also important that if you get that opportunity, you need to be very quick in terms of shaking off your biases, getting rid of your stereotypes. Behaviors that work in your country may not necessarily work in another country. You have to be very sharp in observing both the verbal and the non-verbal cues, because sometimes what you say may get misinterpreted by the other culture or vice versa, and the intent is not bad but the interpretation is bad. So it's important that you understand and respect each other's culture, because nothing is worse than not understanding the culture, but also nothing is more beautiful than being in an international career and appreciating and understanding all these cultures. So I think this is my advice, that be very clear why you want an international career, and then move forward with your approach, but then be very open to getting out of the comfort zone and forming your learning curve.
You're so spot on. First is, of course, why, and getting out of comfort zone. And the most wonderful part that I love was getting rid of your biases. I think what
Yes.
I have also observed is people move into international careers, but really they don't change. They're still the
Yes.
same, and they expect the world around them to be like them. It's not very encouraging to see that people still live in their own bubble. I think if
Right.
you are given an opportunity to be in a global career, you should maximize it to the fullest in terms of
Yeah.
understanding those fine nuances and moving forward. Yeah, I love the bit that you said
Indeed.
about the culture. But now I believe that as you've been talking about embracing the culture, interpreting it in the right way. So I believe communication is also one of the key things, and especially in global careers, in these dotted line reporting, matrix communication, global regional
Hmm.
roles, and more these are happening now, at least in big hubs of the businesses. So, what skills one can really hone to manage this kind of complexity, and not just manage,
Right.
really
Yeah.
thrive, really
Yeah.
stand out?
Yeah.
Because let's put it this way, that communication is not a forte of Asians in general, but whereas Western world is still fairly, they are confident to communicate their thoughts because of,
Hmm.
less power distance and all of that. So
Yeah.
I communication is a very interesting piece here in this scheme of things. So what recommendation or what are your observations? How have you encountered it, or was it
Yeah.
you were like naturally like
Yeah.
that? I would love to listen to your story and then
Right.
any advice for the audience.
Yeah, now that I've been here out of India for 8 years, when I think about it, there are three aspects in which I had to, let's say, make a shift. So one is coming from India as an Indian. How
Mm,
do you operate and how does the world operate? Second is as a manager.
mm,
How do you do that? And then third is as a leader. So let's see if I can, try to get a bit of a perspective on each one of them. So now, as an Indian, what happens is that the hierarchical dynamics are so different in a European world versus what you see in India. I mean, of course, there's great respect for seniority, even in companies here, but there's so much more freedom to disagree and give your point of view, which is not necessarily true in all the companies in India. So how do you kind of get used to that? How do you get comfortable with that? So that's one thing. Also, there is this inherent, not everyone has it, but sometimes some people tend to think that people who are sitting in these European companies in the headquarters are more superior. I've
mm,
seen my own colleagues who've come in here and they went into a shell and they could not, they were doing fantastically well in the Indian market, but they
mm,
were struggling here for whatever biases or reasons that they had. And I think what I say is that you need to be confident in your own talent and confidence. That's one. But also, you need to remember that every person in the position here is based on their capability, not their nationality.
right.
Because once you bring that mindset, it changes. Then you know that you're there because of a reason, because you've been chosen, you've
Mm,
been identified, and you start operating like that.
right.
The second thing is as a manager. Now in my team, I have people from 8 or 9 different countries and working across different countries. How do I understand their cultural upbringing, their background, where they grew up, their career experience, to then help them grow, to give them the right kind of feedback. So it's
Mm,
also on me as a manager to understand and appreciate their culture. It's not just their responsibility to understand me, it's also my responsibility. And then the third thing is as a leader. Now, as a leader, there are decisions that you make for business. It could be a campaign, it could be a product launch. Which market are you going to choose? Which market are you going to prioritize? It should be from the lens of the business priority
mm.
and not from your own geographical bias. So I think these are the three things that I kind of encountered and overcame and saw over the years. And this is what I kind of tell people, that your own country's nationality. How do you understand that and see how is that different? And of course, a managerial role and a leadership role. How do you differentiate that when you get into an international or global role?
So do you have any example of where you kind of quickly caught yourself saying, oh, this is not right, like I need to reframe this problem in my head? And has it ever happened, if something is coming into your mind right now?
Probably two that come to my mind. One is that as Indians, there is this tendency to quickly answer and respond, and sometimes even before the other person finishes, which is sometimes not seen very nicely in the European culture. And it took me a while to get used to that. That listening is important, even though you're eager and you know the answer, but the patience to listen. That's one. The second thing, which thankfully I didn't have much of that of a problem, but I was given this feedback that in general, what they see as Indians is that they also nod their heads like this a lot,
Yeah.
which is very difficult for people to understand, to get used to that. But also the other side, that how do you sometimes understand when someone is saying something, it may feel very direct to you because you're not used to that. Someone
Mm,
who's not who's not your peer or not your senior, but your team member. How do you take that as that the intent is not to disrespect you, but to just share their point of view? So how do you accept that? So that was another shift that I had to make. And I always say this, that whatever role you're in, it's important that you are, first of all, culturally informed,
mm,
contextually appropriate, and socially in accordance with the norms of that country. As
but
long as you have that in mind, you can thrive and survive in any part of the world.
Absolutely. Love it. Love your nuanced approach to it. And you are so spot on in especially the listening part. This is something I
Mhm.
also saw in myself. And actually, I still catch myself that sometimes you know the answer and you're so eager to talk, but, okay, hold the guns and
Yeah.
just like calm down. All right, Kunal. So we are almost towards the end. We are in our last section of your future plans. So although we did discuss a little bit about it, but I want to ask you that how is your approach to brand communication in general
Mhm.
evolving for the future? And especially, what strategies do you think are essential to engage Gen Zs or Gen Alphas? Because their attention span is, as it
Yeah.
is, very low, and we keep hearing about
Yeah.
this. For sure, this is one of the things that I discussed, that they'll be coming in the workforce. So, or Gen Z is already in the workforce, so the
For sure.
dynamics are different. But in terms of communication, marketing,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
B2B, how do you
Yeah.
see the landscape changing?
Yeah. For sure, they would. B2B marketing will get impacted, is already getting impacted. Let me take a step back and say that, look, when I started my career, the key medium to advertise was either television or print.
Mm,
Social media was still forming its roots.
mm,
So when we would be planning our campaigns, it would always be TV first. That
mm,
meant that you could just create one piece of a 30 seconder or a 60 seconder and then run it for 3 to 6 months. Now, with the digital transformation that's taken place in the last decade or so, it's
mm,
all about churning out content almost on a daily basis. It's
mm,
about agility and speed.
mm,
Attention spans are getting much lower and fatigue sets in much earlier. So
mm,
the challenge for a marketer, B2C or B2B, is that how do you make that thumb scroll pause for a few seconds on
mm,
your content so that the audience sticks around? And that's why it's important to play around with content formats, content buckets, to really keep the new generation excited and engaged. I mean, talking about DSM Firmenich, when we put our annual marketing strategy together, we map out all the content formats we can use, all the content buckets we want to activate based on our priorities, our strategies. And this then helps us to keep our content fresh and insightful. And like I said, it doesn't become boring then. Now, the thing is that with so many touch points, the new generation interacts with all of these touch points. So the challenge is that how do you repurpose your content
mm.
based on the touch point? And why I say repurposing is because it helps in three things. First of all, it allows you to do things in a cost effective way. You can't be creating content for each touch point
Yeah.
every day, every time. Second, the basic foundation of marketing, it helps in repetition. And we know that in marketing, repetition leads to recall. So that's really important.
Mm,
And the third thing is that then the audience feels that the content has been designed for the purpose of that touch point,
mm.
and yet they're getting the same message. So I think this is an important piece that we are now very mindful of as we start targeting the younger audience. Moment marketing is another good way to connect with the new generation. It's a great way to take something topical, bring your own brand's perspective, voice, and point
Mhm.
of view. But I always say that brands have to watch out. It should not become a force fit. You cannot be tone deaf, and you have to be careful. You cannot do something silly that
Yeah.
actually does nothing for the equity or the sales
Backfire.
of the brand.
Yeah.
Backfire, absolutely. So I
Yeah.
think these are the ways in which you kind of have to be careful. And of course, you can't step away from AI. And I also say sometimes that there are two kinds of marketers: the ones that are getting afraid of AI and are trying to keep it away, and then the ones, which I like to count myself in that, who are actually experimenting with it, leveraging it, trying it, and moving with the times, because you cannot say that, oh, because of AI we will stay with our old ways of working. So I think these are things that a marketer has to keep on working on.
Right, right. And I was just reading the quote today that it's not the strongest who survives, it's not the smartest who survives, it's the one who is most resilient to the changes, who can embrace the change, is the
Hmm.
one who survives. So,
Indeed.
I mean, otherwise you'll be lost. All right, it
Yeah.
was wonderful, Kunal. Just about you now. So, what lies ahead of you? What are your plans? I won't say 5 years, but what's next exciting thing up for you?
Wow. Well, I'm enjoying what I'm doing, but obviously you always want to grow. I mean, I always say that if a person is not thinking about growth and they're becoming stagnant and they're stuck in a fixed mindset, so I'm always thinking about how do I grow the business, the brand, the team further. That's always there. But also on a personal level, how do I grow myself and keep myself sharp? So there is obviously the intellectual growth part of it, and this is the best time to be alive with the digital world. You don't need to have mentors and coaches just physically close to you. I listen to so many podcasts, and there's such wonderful perspectives that are coming from different people. And it doesn't have to be only about marketing, it could be about so many different dimensions of life. So I think that that's one thing that keeps me excited. Then there's the skills growth. I mean, I spoke about AI for just a few seconds, but you have to be so much up to speed on what's happening, keep yourself out there. So there's this the skill growth that's important. And I also believe that at this stage in my career, it's also about growth to others. And what I mean by that is that I now mentor a few younger marketers, both officially and unofficially. And that's something I enjoy because one is that you give back what you've gained over the years, but also there's immense learning when you listen to their perspective and how they look at things. So I really enjoy doing that. That's another way in which I'm looking at the future, at how the growth can happen. Yeah, these are a few of the things that really come to my mind.
So much on your plate, and I will not let you go without you telling me, since it's about marketing and you are this expert, I won't let you go without recommending a couple of books or podcasts, whatever are your top recommendations for any young aspiring marketers.
I don't know if you can see, I've blurred it, but there are a few books here which are interesting, which I've enjoyed reading over the years. One of them that's coming to my mind is Phil Knight, The Shoe Fight. That's an interesting book that I enjoyed reading. I finished reading Bob Iger's The Ride of a Lifetime. He was the Disney CEO. That's more on leadership and a bit of strategic framework. Maybe a bit early for a young marketer, but hey, you can always dive in and see if it resonates with you. So that's another one that's coming to my mind. Yes, podcasts are an easier one. I think the 3, 4 that come to my mind, I listen regularly to the CMO podcast of Jim Stengel. He was to be the former CMO of Procter and Gamble. So he brings different marketers from different industries. So it's interesting to see how they're thinking, and I'll enjoy and try and compare how they're thinking versus my thinking. There is Exit 5 podcast that's focused on B2B marketing. Dave Gerda speaks about B2B marketing. So that's another interesting one if someone wants to really sharpen themselves in B2B. And then if you want something in general, one of my favorite podcasts is Tim Ferriss, because he brings people from different walks of life who've achieved success in things that I may not even have thought of. So I really enjoy Tim Ferriss' podcast. I always recommend that to people. So these are a few that are instantly coming to my mind.
Well, this was excellent, Kunal. Thank you very much. I loved every bit of this conversation.
Thank you.
I believe this, not just for marketers, but anybody listening to it would definitely enjoy it, because there's just so much you brought on the table. Thank you so much for your time. And
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed this conversation, and your questions were thoughtful, insightful, and helped me to reflect back on my journey. And that's really what it should all be about. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And we wish you good luck for your future endeavors.